What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2021 Volkswagen Atlas. Huge thanks to Volkswagen for providing me here with the refreshed Atlas to review for you guys today. So the Atlas, it's been around for a few years now, and I already reviewed one about 3 years ago whenever these first came out. This refresh here for 2021 is pretty substantial as far as the exterior goes. Underneath the skin, it's basically the same. So, it should drive pretty similar and stuff, but we will still take it out on a back road and see how it does. But as far as the looks go, so the biggest change is, of course, the front end and the back end. It has a new front bumper, new rear bumpers, and those bumpers combined to make the Atlas actually 2.4 inches longer than it was pre-refresh. So that's a pretty significant amount of extra length there. And so it makes the Atlas look a little more muscular in my opinion. Now this is the R-Line version as well, which is an optional kind of appearance package you get. It is also something you can only get with a V6 engine. You cannot get it with a 4-cylinder, unfortunately. And so I think it just really ups the looks of the Atlas a lot. And I think the first generation Atlas styling started to look a little dated here this year. This really nicely freshens it up. You have these new sharp IQ light headlights up front here that are just really attractive and kind of nicely blend into that grille still, but are definitely a lot more modern looking than the ones on the old Atlas. And then again, just that very aggressive front bumper. And supposedly this R-Line styling, by the way, is only an order option. So you can't get these just sitting around on dealer lots, I guess, unless the dealer specifically orders it. But so it might be a little bit harder to find, but I think it's worth seeking one of these out because I think this bumper looks a lot more aggressive than the regular bumper you get on a standard 2021 Atlas, but looks really good up front there. Coming down to the sides, now this is an SE model with a technology package, so it doesn't get the larger 21-inch wheels you get on the SEL, but these 20-inch wheels still look really nice. I like how dark they are, especially with the silver paint color. This whole vehicle looks really good altogether. I also like the little R badge you have here on the fenders and into the doors. And then going out towards the sides and the back, I really like how sculpted the fenders are here. It really gives us a very cool look still from the side profile. And out back you have some attractive new tail lamps there, as well as the rear bumpers redone, and you have fake exhaust tips there, which isn't something I'm in love with, but more and more companies are doing it these days. It's just the way things are going, so it is what it is, but it does look attractive there in the lower part of the rear bumper. And so overall I think it's some really nice improvements to the exterior styling here on the Atlas. Alright, so let's start up and go for a drive. The Atlas here has the same great Volkswagen key you get in other Volkswagens, but in this one you have the metal here on the top and on the bottom, and so it makes it feel a lot more premium. It has a nicer weight to it and feels a lot more expensive, because in something like a Jetta, you just get this all in plastic and it feels really cheap. I hope that they roll this out on all new models because this feels really nice, and I like how small it is, because with other keys these days they're getting huge, and I really like how small it is. But anyway, it's keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start here in the Atlas. So just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. And if you're curious to hear about the interior in the Atlas, my wife and I actually just did a full in-depth interior review on the Atlas, and so you can go watch that. I'll link it above if you want to hear all our thoughts on this interior. Overall, it's okay. It's certainly not best in class or anything, but it's certainly not the worst either. And so overall, pretty middle of the road, but Volkswagen loyalists will definitely like all the familiarity of these controls. All right, so setting off here in the 2021 Atlas. So the first thing you notice, well, the Atlas has a really nice high seating position, a very commanding view of the road. You sit up nice and high here in the Atlas with a nice large seat you're sitting on here. And so it just gives you a really good view forward. It's so clear. You do have a little bit of a blockage by the side mirrors here for your A-pillar. That's not perfect, and stuff like the Subaru Ascent and a few of the others do have a smaller A-pillar there. But aside from that, I mean, visibility is really good. View out of the back's pretty good as long as you don't have the headrest up for the third row there. And so it's a very easy car to drive in that regard. You also do have parking sensors here, and of course a backup camera and all those types of things to help you out as well. You do really feel like it's a large SUV though. It feels very wide, a little bit bigger than maybe some of the other competitors, but a lot of them these days do feel similar in their size. And so, it's not too bad once you get used to it. You do also have optional lane keeping assist. Now this one being only an SE with technology, it's not an SEL or higher, so I don't have that lane keep assist function here, but that is something you're able to get. And whenever I did did test it out in the SEL 2018 model that I had a few years back, and that it was constantly nudging at the steering wheel. I'll be curious to see, if it does that here in the revised version of the Atlas, but I wasn't in love with that system, so I don't really miss not having it here on this 2021 version. And so that's one interesting thing to note, though. But otherwise, you have all the other safety stuff. Now, blind spot monitoring is standard, automatic emergency braking, rear cross traffic alert, all that stuff is standard here in the Atlas, which is really nice. Other things I noticed about the Atlas right off the bat is that steering is really light, but pretty quick. It really feels eager to change direction just because of how light the steering is, and that's a stark contrast from most of the other SUV competitors. Almost everything, I think, in this segment has heavier steering, and so that makes it feel a little less eager. Now, obviously, as far as actual handling goes, I'll tell you more about that on the back road, but as far as just the feeling you get behind the wheel, this feels very eager and darty because of how light the steering is, and I really like that about the Atlas. Also, throttle response is really sharp too. It really feels like it wants to go and feels very eager with that throttle response, so much so that you actually have to be a little bit delicate with your throttle input sometimes, because otherwise it can get really jumpy if you're not used to it. Brakes also have a nice progressive feeling to them, but we'll go ahead and put the transmission into its sport mode. We'll put the driving mode into its sport mode here. So we got everything in sport mode, and yeah, let's turn down onto this back road, get really jumpy throttle, and see how it does. And here we go. Springs into action, but the transmission still was caught off guard a little bit there. But then it picks up and moves very nicely. So, and you have that signature VR6 sound, which is very cool here in the Atlas. It's the only one that uses a VR6. It's the only Volkswagen, it's only a Volkswagen thing. But anyway, it's a 3.6 liter, narrow angle V6. It does 276 horsepower, 266 pound-feet of torque. It only does a 0 to 60 time of about 8 seconds. But it feels punchier than that, especially when you're up and moving. Now, it's not the fastest in this segment or anything. I think the Mazda CX-9 with its 320 pound-feet of torque from its turbo engine might be the punchiest of the group, but this still has a good amount of punch, and it's right in line with most of the other V6 competitors. You get, like the Honda Pilot, now the Kia Telluride, Hyundai Palisade, all those types of vehicles. And it is a little bit more immediate than stuff like the Subaru Ascent, which has, a turbo 4-cylinder, and that. I think this feels a little bit punchier than that. You also are running it all through an 8-speed automatic transmission, which I have noticed still gets a little bit confused sometimes. It's not the best programmed automatic transmission, but it's not too bad. But yeah, you really have to be delicate with your throttle because this thing really wants to go. This would be a great SUV if you're in a hurry a lot because it always like, all right, let's go. And it's always just like, all right, let's go dive into this corner because the steering's light and the throttle is super responsive and everything about this. If you're someone who gets annoyed with waiting around, especially with some of the other competitors having CVTs and stuff, I mean, there is no BS with the Atlas. I mean, you want to go, it gives it to you. And I really appreciate that about it. It's just something you do have to get used to, since so many of the other competitors are set up to be so soft and just a little bit more delayed and lazy in their reactions. The Atlas is not, and I appreciate that in the pre-refresh version of the Atlas, and I love it here in this. But we're coming up to some corners here. Let's see how the Atlas handles with these R-line wheels and stuff. It handles itself really good. So we're on 255 wide tires as well. If you go to the SEL with those 21-inch wheels, you can even get 265 wide tires. So even more grip, which is really unheard of, in vehicles like this. All the other competitors usually have narrower tires. But yeah, this thing really handles well, and it's flinging my camera gear around back there. It really does a good job. I still think the Atlas is one of the better handling crossovers in the 3-row segment. I really am impressed with it. It's pretty flat with its handling too. I mean, yes, you're feeling the weight, of course. It's about 4,750 pounds. It's a huge behemoth of a vehicle, so I mean, you have to keep that in mind. It's not going to handle like a GTI or anything, but it does handle itself really well, and these brakes are so responsive. All right, so the tires are starting to give up there a little bit. So you don't have endless capabilities, certainly. It still is a 3-row crossover. You can't be overly confident, but it still does, feels pretty eager, and I'm really impressed with it. Now, I think it's even a little bit stiffer as far as the handling than a Honda Pilot or something. Certainly feels a little bit better than the newest stuff, even the Telluride, the Palisade, all that. I think that the Mazda CX-9 doesn't feel quite as eager because it has heavier steering, but I think it also has a little bit more grip and feels a little bit flatter than the Atlas, just because it also isn't quite as big feeling as the Atlas is. So the CX-9 has that going for it, but I honestly still think the Atlas is towards the top of the pack as far as handling. If you want a good handling three-row crossover in the non-luxury segment, I think this is still going to be one of the best picks out there as far as that goes. And like I said, if you want even better handling, getting that SEL with the 21-inch wheels, 265 wide tires will give you even better grip. And now this one, speaking of grip, does have the 4Motion all-wheel drive system, which is optional. You can still get these with front-wheel drive, although I believe that is only for the turbo 4-cylinder version of the Atlas, which is a good motor, by the way. That's also a very punchy motor still. I reviewed that in the Atlas Cross Sport, if you're curious to hear my thoughts on that, the two-row version of the Atlas here that's new for this year. But in that, that was really punchy, and that turbo motor is very impressive still, but I still do kind of like the simplicity of this V6, not having any turbo lag or anything like that. But it's so funny how even though this does have the all-wheel drive, it almost feels like the front wheels want to spin every time I jump on that gas, because it is just so eager to go, and it's so funny. But I really do like going around corners in the Atlas, which is kind of, uncanny that a three-row crossover can be enjoyable in corners. But this one actually is. So I think that's one of the best things the Atlas has going for it, honestly, is its handling. It really does feel great. But we'll go ahead and pop it out of these sport modes here, go back into the normal drive modes, and let the car settle down here. And it still is a really nice cruiser too. So, whenever you're on main roads like this, it's pretty refined in here. I don't think it's the most refined. The CX-9 definitely has the speed on refinement that has a smoother ride and a quieter ride. So if you want something that's a little more luxurious feeling, that's going to probably be a better choice. And I think honestly, even the Telluride, the Palisade, and the Pilot, I think all might have slightly better insulation and just don't have quite as much road noise as you have here in the Atlas, but it's really not bad. I'm splitting hairs here. This still is going to be pretty refined for, a family crossover. I think it does a pretty good job with that, but it's just a really nice cruiser, so whenever you are out of the sport modes and stuff, throttle response is still sharp, but it's a little bit easier to modulate smoothly. But now out on the highway here in the Atlas, it still is a pretty nice thing. I honestly don't think there's even too much road noise here at highway speeds. It's pretty good, and this isn't perfect pavement. It still does a really good job. I also have the adaptive cruise control system on right now, which also now does have the stop and go support. So it'll actually, inch up in traffic for you and come to a stop completely and all that, which is very nice. Now I'm not going to be sitting in any kind of rush hour traffic here to test that out, but I have tested out in other Volkswagens in the past, and it seems to work pretty well. And so it's nice to have that. And again, you can get the lane keep assist system so that you can have it help you steer a little bit on the highway. This one doesn't have that feature, so I can't test that out, but I'm sure it works in helping you at least stay in your lane a little bit, but how much it helps, I'm not sure. But as far as a highway cruiser goes, the Atlas is really nice and pleasant. I personally like doing my own steering, so I'm not missing not having that feature. It's just really nice. The light steering at highway speed still isn't too light. It still feels really good, nicely loads up, and I think this would be a really great highway cruiser. And the last two things I mentioned here about the Atlas are the fuel economy and the pricing of the Atlas. So first off, fuel economy here. So now I only put about 60 miles on this vehicle so far, and it was mostly city driving, but I only managed to get 15.5 mpg. Now these are rated at 16 in the city, 22 on the highway, and 18 combined. And so this is pretty much in line with what I usually get in three-row crossovers, where I get about 1 or 2 mpg less than their city ratings. And so this is in line with that, and it's only half mpg lower than the city rating, but it's still a little bit lower than most of the competitors that I've spent a week with. The Telluride, the Palisade, all those types of three-row crossovers, even the Highlander, I was getting closer to like 18 mpg in those. So I am a couple mpg lower, and if you look at the EPA fuel economy ratings compared to all the competitors of the Atlas, this is a little bit lower than most of the other competitors. So it's not just my experience, it's the EPA's experience as well, that this just isn't as fuel efficient as many of the other three-row crossovers. And if you really want something fuel efficient, there's now the new Toyota Highlander Hybrid. That'll give you much better fuel economy than everything else, because they're basically the only ones that offer a hybrid at this point in time. And so that's the one to pick if you want really good fuel economy. But But, you know, even if you don't care that much, just know that even all the V6 versions of all the other, you know, crossovers out there, you're going to be probably getting a little bit better fuel economy here than you get in this. And then the last thing I mentioned here about the Atlas is the pricing of it. So, you know, they start in the mid 30,000s like all the other three-row crossovers. This one, as tested, is about $42,500 because it is just an SE with the technology package. So this is a little bit of a lower trim, but it's kind of refreshing since usually, you know, press vehicles are fully loaded models and this one isn't. And so at 42.5 or so, you know, it does undercut some of the others, you know, but the thing is they really strip down the options in this. And so I kind of mentioned this a little bit more in the interior review, but you don't have nearly as many options as you get in the Hyundai and the Kia especially, but also the Honda Pilot and all those others. You know, those you can get some nicer features. You know, there is no like heated steering wheel in this, there's no cooled seats, there's no moonroof whatsoever. I mean, a lot of them just give you a moonroof as standard, and then the panoramic moonroof is an option. You can get a panoramic moonroof in this, but I don't know if they give you any kind of normal regular moonroof. But this one, even being $42.5 you have no moonroof whatsoever, which is a little bit surprising. And the plastics and stuff in here are a little bit less premium than some of the others. And so, yes, you know, all the like the Kia Telluride, the Palisade, those that I reviewed are like $46,500 for their fully loaded versions. But you get so much extra content with those, and even if you go down to a lower trim of all the competing vehicles, I still think you get some nicer interior materials. So really, what it comes down to, and you're also going to be getting better fuel economy and all the rest as well. So what it comes down to is the handling, I think. I think that is still the best thing about the Atlas, that and its size. It is really spacious, and, you know, like the Mazda CX-9 is smaller. Some of the other competitors are a little bit tighter inside than the Atlas. So if you like the space of the Atlas, or you love the way that it handles like I do, those are going to be your reasons to go for an Atlas. Otherwise, if you're looking for feature content or nice interiors, I don't think the Atlas is going to win out in any kind of comparison test with all the others out there. So, you know, it kind of comes down to personal preference a little bit as well. But personally, I think that there's probably some better choices even at this price point. Even if you go for a lower trim of the other competing vehicles, you know, they'll give you digital gauges, which you can get again as an option here in this, but you got to go up to those higher versions, whereas some of the others make that kind of stuff standard or, you know, on lower trims. And so, yeah, overall, I think it's very competitive in a lot of ways, but personally, even though the handling's fantastic, in a three-row, I don't think most people really care about handling a whole lot, and so I would probably go for one of the slightly worse handling three-row crossovers. It's stuff like a Honda Pilot still handles very good, that has true torque vectoring all-wheel drive and all kinds of other cool tricks up its sleeve, and there's lots of other crossovers that still do handle pretty well in the three-row segment, so it's not like they're all bad and this is the only good one. So that's why it's kind of hard to even give the edge to the Atlas in that regard, because, you know, it is such a hotly contested segment. There's so much fierce competition with three-row crossovers that I just don't know if the Atlas has, you know, upped the ante enough. And this refresh, you know, doesn't really move the ball much as far as interior stuff goes or anything. So I still think they could use a fully new version to really come out swinging. But in the meantime, this refresh is a good way to keep at least the exterior styling a little bit fresher here for the Atlas. And for those, again, who like the, you know, larger proportions or the handling, the Atlas is still going to be a good pick. But yes, that's all my thoughts here on the 2021 Volkswagen Atlas. Let me know your thoughts on the Atlas in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.